Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. I've been thinking a lot about the new changes to Aether raids, so I thought it might be a great time to make an updated Mythic tier list. And I thought it might also be fun to bring along someone who happens to be the best AR player I know, my friend Levin.
Oh, I'm not that. I'm okay. Well, thank you. Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. I'm Levin, full name LevinSety. I play Aether raids on YouTube pretty much every day. I'm rather goofy, and the very one, coined the phrase razzle dazzle as it applies to this game. So before we get started on actually ranking the units, let's talk a little bit about what we think the tiers kind of mean, or what scale we're rating the units on. So to me, the S tier means an oppressive unit that will more or less get you free wins if the other team doesn't have some sort of counter for it, locked and loaded. And to me, the low tier, the D tier here, is unit just doesn't fulfill the role that they need to for the specific blessing they're associated with, or the specific season they're associated with in Aether raids.
So let's get right into ranking the heroes, and we're gonna do them in the order that you see here. This is just alphabetical order, so I thought that would be good to do because it's kind of just random. So we're just gonna start off with Altina.
Altina. Me and Altina have sort of a thing going on, and it hurts me to have to do this, but I think she's really lost favor. Specifically this month, she's sort of been outplaced twice. There is now a more relevant attack-blessed Astra unit, and a more relevant red DC Brave dual phase unit named Altina. So she's hurting a bit.
Yeah, I do think that her usefulness has gone down a lot since Reginn was introduced. First of all, because giving attack +3 as an offense mythic, in my opinion, isn't that amazing. So combining that with the fact that Reginn is also a sword, also gives attack, I just do think Altina has definitely fallen off.
When I was working on my own tier list, organize my thoughts, I really wanted to try and squeeze her into maybe the top of B tier, but I honestly couldn't justify it.
Yeah, I actually had her in B tier as well, but I made this tier list for myself at the beginning of the week, and honestly, I think after playing with Reginn and seeing just how useful and how good Reginn is, I think I'm gonna have to bump her down a tier as well. I do think she may be C tier.
I had her smack dab in the middle of C tier.
Okay, so I guess we're in agreement that she's C tier, unfortunately for her.
Yeah, I'm gonna stand by my girl. I will continue trying to use her against any Brave Hectors I run into for fun, but I don't really think it's a good idea. I wouldn't really recommend it to anyone else. Alright, so next up, we got Bramimond. I say Bramimond usually, and I think they are a little easier to rank. I think there's a lot of consensus on where this fellow should go.
Yeah, Bramimond is a unit who is on 80 to 90% of dark defense teams now, and they've created a meta now where if you're using an infantry tank, they kind of need to have no follow-up, so...
Yeah, I think they are extremely meta-defining in Dark Season.
I think the thing about them that makes them so good too is if they manage to get danced and go and attack another one of the units on the opposing team, they're almost always going to get a kill too because they basically guarantee double. So, Bramimond is just really, really good in my opinion.
There was a time when I felt like I just didn't have trouble facing them. And I have no idea what I was doing back then, because now, just a really, truly oppressive unit. Because the thing is, even though you have, null follow-up and other things to counter Brammy, it's not enough every time. If Brammy gets danced, even if you have null follow-up, you might still just die.
I think we're in agreement with what tier to put them in.
To me, this is an obvious top tier.
I had that as well. One of the easiest picks, actually, to put in top tier, in my opinion.
Originally, I had Brammy listed as the third best mythic in the game, but thinking about it more, I might say second.
Well, I guess we'll get into who you think is first later on.
Aha, yes we will.
Alright, so on to Duma. Duma, who is a bonus unit this week, and both you and I have been using him on our defense teams, so what do you think of Duma?
So Duma's a really interesting case, because I feel like there was a time when Duma was kind of not considered good, but I feel like as the meta has developed, just the simple fact that he can act as a level infinity catapult is pretty strong. And I also do feel like he's a surprisingly versatile unit. Like, he can run like DC Vantage to be annoying, he can run Wary Fighter Fell Breath to be really hard to kill in one hit. He can run in like an armor ball, and I think stall teams are gaining more viability, so that's like a really nice pivot option to have. He's just weirdly like, you can always just run like Wings of Mercy or Bold Fighter and just be this like really threatening presence that you are forced to play around, because if he touches you, you might die.
Yeah, and you were mentioning that you think he's one of the mythics who benefits the most from the new rotating mythic bonus.
Yeah, I feel like armors really get extra mileage out of 10 HP. Of the other like anima defense mythics, I don't think like Mirabilis or Lif can really use the stats as well in the way that he can, just because his weapon can prevent follow-ups and he can run Wary Fighter and just all sorts of ways to be annoying with all those stats to break through.
Now that it's pretty much guaranteed he's going to be a bonus mythic like once every 5 or 6 weeks, I do think I would probably have to bump him up a tier from where I initially had him.
Yeah, I ended up bumping him up myself too. I had him in B, actually.
I actually had him in the same. So I initially had him in C tier, but I think he's one of the units who benefits the most from the new changes, so. Next up, we've got Air, who I believe was the OG offense mythic, so it's fun to do her right after Duma. What do you think of Air?
I think Air is still really good, honestly. I feel like a lot of people talk about Air in terms of like the weirder setups you can run on her, like for setting up Air Force or running Tamari and swapping out all her skills. But I honestly think even with just her base kit, she does a lot really well. Like, she can soak hits from dragons, she can tank magic, she can snipe structures and mages, and she can heal, like, she can heal your tank from across the map, which I think is like one of the most helpful skills of any mythic in Aether raids.
For me, Air is just not that good, in my opinion. I just don't see much of a reason to use her over Mila unless you do want to run triple mythic. So in my opinion, she is the weakest of the light mythics, but I guess she can still be decent.
Well, so I didn't even mention this at first, but one of the biggest things about her, I think, is the res blessing is huge. Because, I mean, how long have you been clamoring for a res mythic in Astra season? It would totally change the game there, and I think we're spoiled by just having it from the start in light. And just generally, I find it really helpful to have a dagger unit on the field, because she can, like, finagle some debuffs to make a clutch kill happen somewhere else.
You know what? I think I'm going to agree with you. I think you're leaning towards A tier. Am I right?
A tier is exactly where I put her.
Okay, I had her in B tier, but I think you've sold me on A tier. I think there were a couple things that I just didn't consider. So I'm going to have to agree with you on that one.
Fittingly, to follow up Air, we have Mommy Skeleton herself, Hel. What do you think of Hel?
I might be a little bit biased on how good Hel is because I run Lucas as my main tank in light season, and Hel has been giving me a lot of problems when I'm not able to hit her with my bolt tower. So I do have the 40 HP bolt tower, so if I do manage to get off that damage on her, it is really easy to take her out after that. But if she's out of the range of the bolt tower, I've personally found her really, really annoying to deal with. So I think she's actually really annoying to kill, especially if you give her like Mystic Boost Seal now. I think she's going to be even more annoying to kill. But I don't know, what do you think?
I think the Mystic Boost Seal really changes the game on Hel. Now that you can run that and Guard Bearing, it just makes her like way more of an ordeal to kill. Whereas like before you had to pick between one of those things, and either one, like only having one leaves her with a necessary weakness, like a big red mage or a really fast unit, but now you sort of need to have both ready maybe to really get through her. And I also think she's definitely an annoying unit to fight, but I think her greatest strength is in her defense blessing, because I do feel like in light season, physical tanks are super, super popular, and as the meta might move more towards stall teams is something I'm sort of thinking that might happen. Getting that extra defense from Hel is just going to get more and more valuable. She can definitely just kind of fizzle in combat against the right setups, but if you use her really smartly, I think she can just make herself and everything around her way harder to kill, and that's really strong. Perhaps perhaps now more than ever.
I initially had her in B tier when I first made this list at the beginning of the week, but I think with the inclusion of the Mystic Boost seal, and after thinking about it a bit more, I think I personally have her in A tier now.
I had her in B tier. I still feel like from my personal experiences, I would keep her in B tier, but I do feel like speculatively she's getting better. We haven't even had a chance to see a Dark Season with the Mystic Boost seal yet, so I may well pay for those words in the next 3 days even. But yeah, I'm fine. I'm very comfortable with her either in B or A. I feel like she's like high B, low A range.
Okay, I'm gonna put her in B tier then, just because I feel like we're gonna have a lot more people in A tier, so she's going in B tier, but definitely, it looks like I can't, okay, I can rearrange them. I'm just gonna put her at the top just because she is probably one of the best units who's in B tier. Alright, so next is Lif. I don't know if his name is Leaf or Lif, but I think we should just call him Lif just to differentiate him from your boy Leaf. So, what do you think of Lif?
I'm not wowed. I'm not wowed by this one. I've chosen my Leaf, my Lif, my character with a name that has these approximate letters in it. It's not him. I just don't really feel like he can't like support like Mirabilis can. He can't shred things offensively like Thrasir can, and I don't feel like he makes as good of a like tank wall frontliner as Duma does, so I feel like he sort of struggles to find his footing.
Yeah, I think among the anima mythics, I definitely don't really see him having a really solid place. I do think the other ones all provide a lot more utility and a lot more combat potential than he can. Part of the reason why he's also not even that good to run is because his weapon deals the 20 damage to the people around him. I just feel like that's not really a worthy trade-off, him getting that double and also dealing damage to people around him. So I just feel like he's kind of sabotaging the team too.
Yeah, and that's built into his weapon too, which is annoying. It's not even like you can swap in a better B skill or something, because his B skill is good. It's almost like he's like the opposite of Duma, because Duma can snipe the bolt tower, and Lif is like an extra bolt tower.
An extra bolt tower against your team, yeah.
I'm sure there are ways to apply him really smartly, but just as a general use case, I see him as being the worst of the anima mythics in the game currently.
So it kind of sounds like you're going for bottom tier with him? Or were you
I actually had him at the bottom of C tier personally, but I'm not horribly upset if he... Looking at it now, I think I might actually want to swap him with someone I had in D tier, so maybe, yeah.
Yeah, so I actually had him in C tier on my original list too, but now just talking to you about him, I really just don't feel very positively about this unit. Like, I feel like we can put him in D tier.
I do think he might benefit decently from bonus stats, but yeah, that 20 damage is just a problem. I'm pretty sure I've won matches off that 20 damage that I did not deserve to win, so that is a bad sign. So let's move on to the next one. I'm excited to talk about this unit because we've gotten to the Mila part of the show. What are your thoughts on Mila?
As someone who doesn't have a Mila, I haven't gotten her to experience just how good she is myself, but I know very well the importance of planning your Dark Season team around Mila, because it's gotten to the point where 80% of the teams who you see on offense in Light Season have got a Mila on their team. So it's gotten to the point now where your defense team has to actively play around the fact that Mila exists just to be viable, because if you've only got one dancer whose name is not Dancer Eldigan, Mila just kind of makes your team a joke to face. So I feel like you either really need to have a really high defense dancer like Eldigan, or you need to have two dancers. And I don't know, like to me, she's just very meta-defining.
I could not agree more. I know we usually save this for like later on in the discussion, but I'm just going to come out and say I think Mila is hands down the best mythic hero in the game, and it's not even close. Just the amount of impact she has on the meta and like how she forces teams to be composed a certain way is, I think, unmatched, honestly. And it's also like the fact that her weapon can pretty consistently give +2 to all stats. That on top of the support she gives by shutting down dancers is like unreal, and then she gives you an extra turn on top of everything. Like, she does like 4 or 5 things, and you could pick half of them, and if she only did those, she'd still be a good unit.
I think, honestly, I don't feel like you're exaggerating. I do think that she is the strongest mythic in the game, and I think the fact that she has just forced an entire season of defense teams to play around her existence just tells you how good she is.
Yeah, I guess she's getting, like, maybe if Odd Recovery makes a big splash, she might be a little bit less important, but even if she doesn't get off isolation in half of your matches, like, she's still providing these massive AoE buffs, this extra turn, like, the defensive stats. It's just, she does a lot. She honestly feels kind of bad to use because she's just so strong.
All right, then I think we're in agreement. She is definitely S tier. There's no question about that.
Of everything on this list, that is like the one thing you could not have talked me out of, so I'm really glad you do agree.
Alright, so next up we've got Mirabilis. I don't really know how to pronounce her name, but she is a dancer who was kind of recently added, and I do think she's pretty good, but what do you think, as a person who actually has her?
I like Mira a lot. I think she is very good. One of my, like, more controversial opinions is that while I think the dancer mythics, this is the first dancer mythic we're talking about, I think they're very good, but I do feel like they don't necessarily provide a unique advantage versus other units that could fill the role, I guess. Like, there are reasons to run dancers that aren't Mira in anime season. Not always great reasons, and she's the best choice in a lot of cases, but, like, other units can fill her role, and I don't feel like there's a specific way you counter Mira that's different from other dancers. But I do think that the support she provides in general is really tremendous. Like, she does give these AoE debuffs that sort of fill in the other effects of Mythics in anime season, and her general, like, focus on attack stats I think is going to make her really valuable in stall teams going forward, which is going to become more popular, so I still think she's very good.
I just think the fact that she is both a dancer and provides the utility of reducing your lift loss, to me that definitely makes her, like, really good, but I would say she's not quite S tier. I had her in A tier.
Also had her in A tier.
Okay, I'm glad we agree. Yeah, I just think that the fact that she's a dancer, you're right. There are other dancers who you could run, but because she is the only dancer who will also help with lift loss reduction, I do think she deserves a spot in the second highest tier.
If nothing else, it's sort of like the other side of the, like, meta-defining coin, but it's like she gives you more options in your team composition. You can combine your mythic and your dancer and then have another spot for, like, a strong unit. So, okay, let's talk about Naga. What do we think about Naga these days?
I think her only selling point right now is Divine Fang. I'll be honest. She's a flyer dragon, so her BST is not necessarily the greatest. Her attack and speed are decent, but I still feel like they're too low to actually be able to help with soaking any kind of offensive chills. And she's just very frail, so I do feel like the only thing she really has going for her is Divine Fang.
I can't really say anything you're saying is wrong. I will say that I find Divine Fang to be really, really useful. Like, I think, again, like, as Duma has sort of grown in value, so has Naga, but I think that the way Duma's value has amplified is at a greater pace than Naga's has. So she's definitely got her uses, and the fact that the rest of her skills are so questionable does sort of make her, like, free to run whatever support build you want, but that's not really a good thing. Like, anyone else could also do that and do more stuff on top of it. So I had her in the C tier.
Okay, I had her in the D tier. I just think she's kind of terrible, but then again, I also don't have her, so maybe I'm kind of, like, underestimating how good she is. Why'd you put her in C? You think she's on the level of Altina?
So of all the Astro Mythics, she and Plumeria are the only ones that really offer support in a traditional way. And Naga's support is in the form of Divine Fang and that defensive stack. And just, like, the fact that you're going to run into so many Dumas does mean that Divine Fang is not a trivial skill to have on hand, but I totally understand the argument for her to be in D tier, and it is like, she does do these things, but are these things more valuable than what the other mythics do? That's tough to say for me.
Yeah, I definitely feel like she is worse than Altina, ? That's how I would see it, but I guess, like, Altina would be more of, like, the top of C tier, whereas I guess Naga could be, like, bottom of C tier.
I'm very comfortable with bottom of C tier, top of D tier.
I am gonna stick her in D tier, but that's just my opinion and a little bit of your opinion. I feel very reluctant to put her in the same realm as Altina. Alright, so next up we've got Peony, who is one of the mythics who we got for free, and as a dancer she does provide a pretty good utility, but what are your thoughts on her?
I think Peony is really, really good, and the reasons that I think Peony is really, really good are chiefly the range on the in-combat buffs she can provide, and the warping guidance effect. Just that ability can save you in so many situations that you have no business getting out of, and I love her for that.
Yeah, the orders buff that she gives has honestly come in handy so many different times, at least for me, and again, like you mentioned, the visible buffs as well. She can basically give everyone around you buffs with a really easy condition. And I also really like that if you just put her in the same column as whoever you're using, she also gives attack and speed +3. I think that's also really, really helpful.
And the fact that she gives all these stats basically for free with minor setup, and she's a flyer means that if you happen to run flyers for other flyer carries, she can just stack an unreal number of stats onto them pretty much for free, which makes it a lot easier to just not die.
Yeah, so I had her in A tier, probably near the top of A tier, but what do you think?
I would agree, absolutely. So I actually don't have Plumeria, who's the next hero on the list, but you do, so talk to me about where she belongs.
So Plumeria is a dancer, that is her main selling point. I would say her PRF dance skill is not quite as good as Peony's because it doesn't provide the orders buffs, but the fact that she is a dancer on offense just immediately makes her amazing. Ever since I got her, Astra season has just been ridiculously easy because now I don't have to use a dancer in the support slot since one of my mythics is already a dancer.
That's exactly my thoughts on her also. I also feel just the fact that her weapon doesn't give speed, if I remember right. I think that's another knock that puts her I have her one spot below Peony on my list, so I feel they're very, very close.
Yeah, that's exactly where I had her too, so I think we're kind of just in agreement with this one.
I don't have Sothis either, but I know you have tried to find ways to make her work on defense, so where have you decided she belongs?
So Sothis is a unit who just suffers from the fact that she is a defense mythic. I just feel like she's not very useful on defense. She doesn't really provide anything especially new or fresh or anything. She's not very good offensively. She's not that good of a tank either. So to me, she is kind of a case of being bottom tier. I mean, she's not terrible, and I've seen some pretty good +10 Sothises with maximum investment, but just having a one-off copy of her isn't that great, and I do feel like most of the other mythics are just better than her.
Yeah, that's what I would say too. She just doesn't really have a clear role, and I actually ran into one today who was really threatening because she refused to attack me. She's more threatening when she just doesn't do anything, and I think that's a bad sign.
Definitely, yeah. I think she's bottom tier. I think she's D tier.
I had her down in D.
Next up is Thrasir, who is another anima mythic, and what do you think about her?
I actually think Thrasir is one of the best mythics in the game, and she's lost a little bit of grace recently, especially since the update, but I still think if you're going into Astra season, you need someone who is fast enough and hits hard enough to deal with her, and I think that's big.
Yeah, and another thing that she's done is she's pretty much made it impossible to run any kind of dragon tank in Astra season. I used to run my +10 Fae in Astra season, and I just can't anymore because Thrasir exists. So I kind of agree with you that she's very meta-defining in that season.
Yeah, I originally actually had her as my number 2 best mythic in the game. Thinking about it more, I think Bramimond is actually in a better place right now, but I would feel really weird not putting her top tier.
Yeah, I had her at the top of A tier, but I'm definitely willing to bump her up to S tier.
So now we're heading back to one of the earlier defense mythics added to the game, talking about Yune. Do you have any thoughts about Yune?
I think Yune is in a very weird place where I've seen instances where she can be really good. If you're not careful and she ends up doubling one of your units, she can actually kill some people. And I've also seen some people do neat things with like sturdy impact on her, which also makes her a lot harder to deal with. But just in general, the fact that she's a ranged flyer, her BST is quite low, and her stat spread is not the greatest. So I'm kind of not sure on this one.
Yeah, so I think Yune is not in a good place, especially after the release of Triandra, who is like same movement type, same blessing, same weapon, but has a stat spread that is like a little bit more functional in a lot of ways. Like the fact that she doesn't rely on skills to double, she actually has a speed stat for it, I think is really desirable when null follow-up is such a big part of late season. And she also has a insane dance skill. So it just kind of makes me wonder, like, what is the point of Yune, this unit who takes so much more investment to be able to do really anything, and maybe even doesn't do anything as well as this other mythic that can take the same role.
Yeah, that's a good point. I hadn't even considered, because she kind of had a niche before on like a flyerball team, maybe, but now that Triandra exists and is also a flyer, there's really not much of a reason to use Yune at all. I don't know, what do you think?
I had her in D tier, and I will say that I'm a little biased because most of my experience with Yune is watching her hit zeros on Hector, who is a blue unit, so it doesn't tell a great story about her. And I'm sure that there are stories she can tell that are better, but I just don't see her being really, she's not a unit I'm ever really concerned about, right? When I see her, it's like, I know how to deal with this one, I'm fine.
Next up is Freyja, who was one of our most recent mythics. Her and Triandra were color sharing on the most recent mythic banners, so we haven't had much of a chance to see her in action yet, but I think we've seen enough to kind of make a judgment on her. So what do you think?
So both of these newest mythics, I actually have a really hard time, both of these newest green mythics, I have a really hard time thinking about. Because originally, I thought Freyja was not very good. But with the new changes, I'm actually realizing that since you can take a sacrifice, she enables a lot of like kind of cool Gale Force setups. So she has more of a role than I originally thought.
Yeah, I think the problem that I see with Freyja is because she's an offense mythic, like she's a really good tank obviously and she does have pulse smoke, but the fact that she doesn't get any kind of like mythic stat boost because she is an offense mythic just kind of makes her weaker as a tank in my opinion.
Yeah, and not having the chance to play with her, I don't have much to add about that, but I do agree that she looks set up to be a tank, and I don't think she can do that very well just because she has that stat disadvantage from being a mythic. Her as like a Gale Forcer with Pulse Smoke is very cool because she can just shut down anything pre-charged like that, and even if she dies, it's okay now. So that does give her more of a role. I originally had her D tier, and I think the changes actually do have me thinking maybe she's a C tier.
So I had her in B tier originally. I don't know, like maybe I'm a little bit biased because I do run a Cav line, but I saw a couple of Freyjas face my Cav line last week, and she was actually pretty decent. Like I think Claude could not kill her, so she's a pretty good unit to have to face Cav lines.
So I actually like what you're saying. I think I could be talked up to like a low B tier because like she's not a great tank, but she can do it if she has to. And she can also fill this other role as like setting up Gale Force, pulsing down, just like getting in there and getting out. So that to me is actually a pretty convincing complete kit, right? Jack of all trades type deal.
Okay, so I think B tier is pretty solid for her. Next up is Reginn, who is I guess the most new mythic that we've gotten. And I know you really like her as a character and as a unit, so what do you think of her in terms of tiers?
So I think Reginn is a very interesting addition to Aether raids, and like the one thing about her is obviously she's the only unit in the game right now that enables an extra slot, and that's kind of a big deal. So you can pretty much use her for free on any team if you think about it that way. I don't want to consider that alone as like reason for tiering her because that's going to change in the future.
Yeah.
But it is worth considering somewhat just that like she does have that utility, I guess. But to me, the most interesting thing about her, beyond any of her actual combat potential, is her ability to break structures and then run away. Because I feel like that alone actually does like force hard counters in the form of planning your map out, because you can't rely on the same structures being difficult to deal with or making plays hard, because she kind of negates a lot of them in a way that is perhaps even better than like the ranged flyers you have in light season to sort of snipe structures with.
Yeah, having used her in last week in Astro season, I was just like stunned at how useful it was to have this unit who can just like snipe at structure, then move 3 spaces away, and then do the same thing next turn, and like just keep repeating that. And it's honestly helped enable a lot of strategies that wouldn't have been possible before with only 5 units and without a unit like her. So I do think she's very, very helpful in that sense.
And she's helpful in a way that we haven't really seen in the game before, just like offensively oppressive movement, sort of. Then on top of all that, she has these like this crazy offensive potential as a fighter and can just kind of like run in and snipe units. And I do really feel like everyone has been running around for the last week like, how do I Reginn-proof my team? This is like the most important thing now. I had her at the bottom of S tier. I think there's an argument for either bottom of S or top of A, because like it's not like she necessarily needs a hard counter, but like you absolutely have to consider what she can do when you're setting up your team.
To me, that sounds very similar to needing a hard counter, so I think S tier is good.
I mean, clearly I have no problem seeing Reginn at the top of the list, so... Alright, we got one more to talk about, and she might be a doozy. So, what do you think of Triandra?
So I have a very complicated relationship with Triandra. I don't have a copy of her, but I've been thinking a lot about her because I was debating pulling for her at one point to put on my cav line. And before Odd Recovery was introduced, I would say she was almost like completely useless simply because she completely gets shut down by Mila, and so many people are running Mila on offense. And it's just really unfortunate for her that she's in a season that basically completely shuts down her abilities. So, like, if she can't even act as a dancer, then, like, what's the point, right? But now with the addition of Odd Recovery, I'm feeling like if that starts to make a splash in Aether Raid's defense at all, I do think that bumps her up, like, significantly, because it'll help stop the isolation effect from Mila, which is, in my opinion, the only thing holding her back from being good.
My feelings are very similar to yours. I think in a world where Mila doesn't exist, Triandra's probably easy S+ tier best mythic in the game.
Yeah.
We live in a world where Mila does exist. So I'm still trying to reconcile where exactly that puts her. I'm going to need to see the effects of Odd Recovery, because I've already witnessed cav lines that have that in use, and she is unbelievably strong there, because like turn 1 engage is forced, you absolutely can just neutralize isolation. But on other teams, you can play around Odd Recovery because it's only half the turns. So there's that. But then there are also other ways of setting her up, like oppressive use of space to make it hard to place Mila in front of her, or running 2 copies of Triandra. So I don't know, like, I could see her going almost anywhere because there are so many factors that are up in the air.
Yeah, when I was making my list, I put her in B tier as kind of like a compromise, but okay, like you said, if Odd Recovery was like common and easily available, I feel like she'd be an easy S tier, but I just feel like because it's a seasonal locked skill, and because not everybody runs healers on their defense team in the first place, I just feel like it's not going to make a big impact on the defense meta, so I really don't feel comfortable putting her in the same tier as the other dancers, honestly.
Right, and I still feel like Odd Recovery is not 100% consistent, so even in a world where it becomes accessible, it doesn't completely solve the problem. So I actually also split the difference and just put her in B, because like when she goes off, she really goes off, but you can't rely on her going off. And she was the last one I tiered. Every time I looked at the list, I just like was like, don't make me think about this. I don't want to do this. I think B is agreeable. Looking back at it, how do you feel? Is there anything we need to change?
I'm thinking I may have been a bit too harsh on Naga. I'm thinking maybe she's bottom of C tier.
I do have Naga in C tier, and I do maintain that she's one of very few truly supportive mythics in Astra season, and just that alone is worth something, I think.
Yeah, I'm comfortable putting her in C tier. Are there any other changes that you were thinking looking back on this?
I think this is pretty good. I think I like this.
So I think that's all we have time for today, and I just wanted to give a big thank you to Levin for joining me for this video. It did take us quite a long time to discuss all the mythics and kind of reconcile our different opinions, but I think we did a great job in the end, and this was definitely a lot of fun too.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. I've always been a big fan of your content, and it's really cool to be part of it. I think we put together a really good list that I agree with very much and is better than my original one was, so that's really cool. And yeah, everyone, maybe check out my channel and definitely subscribe to Promise if you haven't yet.
Yes, definitely check out Levin's channel. His AR content is just so good.
Thanks again.
I wonder how many people in the comments are going to be angrily disagreeing with us.
I bet everyone's going to be like, you guys are very smart. We think you're wonderful. Thanks for watching this video. Make sure to like, comment, and smash the subscribe button like it is a thing you want to destroy. I don't know.
I should actually make that our conclusion, just you saying that.
Please don't do that to me.
I'm not going to. Don't worry.
If you do, at least include this part to go with it. Fire Emblem Hero. Fire Emblem Heroes.
Okay, I'm gonna stop the recording now, unless there's something else you want to add.
All right. Lewin is the best character in the game. Bye.